Hello, my name is Zachary Cush, and I'm here to talk to you about why I love Final Fantasy VII. Please consider this little pre-video public service announcement as a spoiler alert for the entirety of the original Final Fantasy VII, as I will be going through its story bit by bit, sequence by sequence. If, for some strange reason, you've never played the original Final Fantasy VII, or are perhaps looking for some kind of divine sign to tell you to go ahead and purchase it on Steam for $12 and play it in its entirety, then you can consider this to be that. If I seem like the kind of guy whose opinions on Final Fantasy VII are something that you think that you would be interested in, but for whatever reason you don't want to sit down and watch this long video in its entirety, you should know that I have made a video, a much shorter video, on why I love Final Fantasy VII, but that's kind of more broad and more focused on kind of the big concepts that I took away from this game, whereas this one is going to be a much more kind of sentimental, fangirlish recounting of the various plot elements of Final Fantasy VII and sort of how I feel about them. So there you go, there's your warning, and on with the show. We fade in with what appear to be stars and the indiscernible noises of the universe at large. The camera is directionless. It isn't sure where to go or what to focus on. We are lost in the cosmic scale of information. There is simply too much for us to process at once. Then, out of nowhere, we see a face. Something familiar to focus on. The face moves and gazes upward, and we now follow this woman as she walks down the street. The camera pulls up and away from her, up and up and up until we lose sight of her completely. Now we gaze upon the city as the title fades in, Final Fantasy VII. After a time, the camera zooms in to another part of the city, where 5 people are entering combat. The camera pauses behind one figure. That's Cloud! Without saying a word, Final Fantasy VII has established its 3 layers of conflict. Personal, social, and cosmic. We've learned that this will be a story about multiple people living disparate lives in parallel. We start to follow Cloud's actions, though we do not have access to his point of view, nor do we ultimately control any of his decisions. We begin to be taught salient information, all in the form of an exciting action set piece. We meet 2 of this story's important characters, Cloud and Barret, and get briefly introduced to 3 of its main concepts: Mako, Shinra, and Soldier. What's more is we're already beginning to form connections with these concepts. Cloud used to be a member of Soldier, which is attached to the Shinra Corporation. Barret opposes the Shinra, so much so that he's willing to commit violence because of the company's use of Mako, which is some kind of power goo. We swiftly learn that Barret and his subordinates oppose the use of power goo for moral and political reasons. Cloud communicates that these reasons are not of interest to him. Cloud is more of a paycheck man than a principled man. Barret spends much of this opening section delivering exposition, but it works because it's more than just an exposition dump. It's presented as Barret trying to convince Cloud of the righteousness of his cause. Our new big friend argues that extracting Mako with reactors is harmful to the very planet upon which they live, and that Shinra's indifference to this harm justifies the violence he commits towards them. We're receiving expository information, but it's biased information. Through this delivery, we learn a lot about Barret, but we also learn a lot about Cloud. Cloud meets Barret's passion with dispassion. Barret's rhetoric disinterests him. To the ex-soldier, this is merely a job and nothing more. Cloud's apathy irritates Barret in that particular way that inaction irritates the active. I wonder if our opinion of these 2 men will be complicated by further story developments. We follow this fun band of buddies and relish in their little baby personalities till we reach the heart of the Mako reactor, where Cloud receives a weird red beam vision and we begin to suspect that he might have the case of the brain mumbles. We fight a boss and then set a bomb. After a pulse-pounding escape sequence, we meet the woman from the opening cutscene and can decide how we want to interact with her. I say, why not buy a flower? I've always wanted to solicit a street vendor during a civic apocalypse. Well, regardless of your choice, a series of text boxes guide Cloud into meeting the members of Avalanche on a train. Once we are given some directorial control of Cloud, we can decide if this episode has enough room to develop a few minor characters, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. These minor characters have just enough personality split between the 3 of them to feel a little bit like people. In fact, I would say that enough effort has been given to them that one might feel a little bit of a profound sense of loss should the 3 of them them come to be horrifically killed a few in-game days later. Cloud can choose to be chummy or dismissive with them. I like to have Cloud be dismissive towards Biggs, yet chummy towards Wedge. Cloud has a soft spot for Wedge that I appreciate being given small moments to express. In fact, you could say that Biggs reminds Cloud of the parts of himself that he's faking, and Wedge reminds Cloud of the actual person that he is. And so, in a brief moment of foreshadowing kindness, Cloud gives Wedge the thing that he has always wanted for himself, for someone to just be nice to him. Well, once we've had our fill of that, we can listen to Barret deliver a clunkily sentimental monologue, in which he bemoans the abstract social divide made literal by Midgar's civil structure. To the big man's astonishment, Cloud accepts his invitation to sympathize with the people of the slums. These characters' rocky relationship has finally begun its first wobbly steps into genuine friendship. We arrive in the Sector 7 slums, a place the game invites us to feel like is maybe a little bit like our house. And there we meet a third major character and learn some interesting things about the characters we already know. After a big, pulse-pounding action sequence where we ended the lives of at least 15 people, things relax and the pace slows down. This little push and pull between pulsating action and chill hangout chill time is one of the many little things I have always admired about Final Fantasy VII. It has masterful pacing. I am adamant in the sentiment that Final Fantasy VII is the best paced work of fiction that has ever fallen out of human brains, and directly into my human brain. The game understands that it's just thrown a lot at you, and that you're going to need a little bit of time to digest the information it has given you. Rather than throwing you immediately into the next action segment, it takes a breather and allows you to hang out in its world and chat with its characters. This commitment to consistent hangout ability with both its world and its characters is a key ingredient to both the success of its fiction and the love the public expressed towards its rather bizarre cast of characters. These people, despite the fact that they look like little blobby Lego people, quickly start to feel like people we know, to the point that if you were to render these blocky characters into modern high-fidelity models, you could make an entire room full of sweaty nerds shriek by just showing them up on the screen. Soon we come to a bar called Seventh Heaven, and we meet Tifa. Tifa has a prior relationship with Cloud, as they were both children in the same place at the same time. Tifa also has a prior relationship with Barret. She either believes enough of his rhetoric or echoes enough of his disdain for Shinra to work with Avalanche. Given what we've witnessed of the loud, conflicting personalities of Cloud and Barret, we can deduce that Tifa possesses powerful, diplomatic bud-stitching capabilities. I wonder if our first impression of Tifa will be complicated by future story developments. As we enter the bar, we meet Barret's daughter, Marlene. Barret is the kind of guy who would replace one of his hands with a gun and wage a guerrilla eco-terrorist war against a global super conglomerate, but he's also an attentive father with a visibly tender and loving relationship with his young daughter. We get to learn some more stuff about Barret, and our understanding of him becomes more complex. Our understanding of Cloud grows more complex as well. Despite his earlier brash expressions of dispassion, he's the kind of guy who would sympathize with the underclasses. And depending on our choices, he might be the kind of guy who likes to get chummy with Barret's flunkies despite earlier expressing his disinterest in even learning their names. Depending on our choices, he might be the kind of guy who brings a flower back to either his childhood friend or a wide-eyed child. In any case, Cloud behaves very differently with Tifa than he does with Barret. Interestingly, and similar to her gun-armed compatriot, Tifa spends her introduction to the story trying to convince Cloud to be just as violently opposed to Shinra as she and Barret are. The contrast between Barret and Tifa's rhetoric sings to me. Cloud still refuses, though his rebuffs are quieter and gentler with Tifa. He has some kind of soft spot for her that he does not have yet with Barret. Tifa cites an overtly saccharine and sentimental promise in which the Ephebe variant of Cloud promised the Ephebe variant of Tifa to be helpful whenever the latter was in need of help. This exchange is just schmaltzy enough that one just might make these two characters one's OTP. I wonder if this scene will be complicated by future story developments. In any event, the guilt trip works. Cloud signs on for another mission, and he will never end up being paid for this job. The trio sets off in the morning to a bombast of punchy music. Hey, did you know the word bombast relates to the medieval Latin word bombix, meaning a silk texture, and is no way related to the word bombard, which was the name of the proto-cannon the Ottoman Turks used to blast down the Theodosian walls of Constantinople, because that word is derived from the Latin word bombus, which means a loud booming sound. Wow, if I had a dog, I think I'd name that dog Bombus. Well, in any event, the player now has the opportunity to explore Sector 7 to the tune of some silk-textured score of Barret's theme. One of the things I really like about Final Fantasy Fantasy VII is just like going to a town and walking around and having a little chat with people. It looks like there was some thought put into what people in this world would say about the things going on around them. It reminds you that the things that you're doing are not just like isolated to your characters and their little character stories, but have broader effects on the world at large. In fact, I like walking around Sector 7 so much that I imagine I would be terribly sad if this colorful town was crushed into oblivion a few in-game days hence. After a little bit of chill time on the train, an alarm sounds, and it ends forever the self-textured music. An inciting action sequence announces that the hangout time has ended and the action time has begun. The Reactor 5 mission is officially greenlit. This segment is a little less linear and a little less set-piecey than Reactor 1. It allows for some elite monster fighting and neato item recovery as rewards for poking around. Once our less structured exploring time is over, however, we are given another sudden snapshot of history, coinciding with a head-gripping, red screen-inducing Cloud spasm, which deepens our suspicion that Cloud has a case of the brain mumbles. Upon the apex of our quest, we meet the first of many antagonists. President Shinra. The Shinra Corporation has evolved from a faceless foe encountered only through their vaguely malicious structures into a personed, plumped, eponymous human man of an officially positioned capacity. This presidential man has decided that he has no identifier outside of that of his role, and he is the kind of man who will go out of his way to personally taunt people he claims are beneath his notice. He makes us fight a giant robot who's got giant robot hands, and in whose destruction, Cloud becomes separated from his companions. After falling from a amount of feet that I am 100% sure would definitely kill me, Cloud has a strange conversation with a disembodied, unidentified voice. Pattern recognizers in the audience just might suspect that this is the same voice who told him to watch out. This isn't just a reactor, a mere in-game day ago. This is our third, yet certainly not final indication of Cloud's brain mumbles. Somewhere on a back burner on the stovetop of our brains, a plot point begins to bubble. With that seed now thrice planted, we get sprung back into the action, and we get to meet the flower seller from the introduction. Seeing as her face is literally the first sensible thing we see after we select a new game, we take the time to speak with her. She talks of materia, and of her possession of a useless materia. Students of the facets of plot structure among the audience will swiftly deduce that the character wouldn't even mention this mystery materia if indeed it did not have a future plot function. We are given opportunities to be kind or dismissive towards our new flower friend. Either choice makes her predisposed to liking us. She tells us her name. It's Eris. Eris seems much more like kind of a normal person than Cloud, Tifa, or Barret. Her casual, chill, chummy attitude just might make us predisposed to liking her. However, like Barret and Tifa, it isn't long before she demands of us favors. And you know, say what you want about Barret, but he at least gave us some money. All Eris ever gave us was the flimsy promise of a date, and all Tifa ever gave us was a one-way ticket to Guilt Trip Town. We are next introduced to some more meat-bodied individuals from the Shinra Corporation. A lightheartedly toned escape sequence commences, in which Cloud mansplains to Eris the organization known as the Turks, who are like the Yakuza if the Yakuza worked for Sony Computer. Please note that these Turks possess zero correlation with the real-life Turks, in the stark parallel to how the word bombard has nothing to do with the word bombast, even though they both have bomba as their first 5 letters. In a cutesy rooftop bonding sequence, Eris hints that she has links to both Shinra and Soldier, but her cutesy deflection of Cloud's questions leaves the exact nature of these connections a mystery, reserved for future plot revelation. One suspects that our first impression of Eris is going to be complicated by further story developments. Cloud decides that, despite the fact that he spent the entire first section of this game telling everybody about how much he didn't care, that he actually would like to return to Sector 7 and thereby return to the plot. Eris decides that she's in the plot now too, and that there's nothing anyone can do to stop her. Her confidence is laudable, especially to an overweight teenager who has yet to develop any of his own. Now we get to move into the section where the game will begin using every trick it can think of to make us like Eris. From her straightforwardness to her expressive interest in the people around her to her often sardonic friendliness, Eris immediately presents herself as a fun, likable, interesting person, plagued by none of the fantastical circumstances which have rendered all of our other characters into emotional messes. So strong is her emotional intelligence that she immediately sees through Cloud's cool guy facade, as she knows that anyone who has to spend an entire afternoon telling everyone about how much they don't care is a person who actually cares a lot. And so she takes immense pleasure from good-naturedly poking holes in it whenever she can. Cloud's intermittent bashful awkwardness around a girl expressing any kind of interest in him is the first step on the player's journey to understand just who Cloud is. After getting to hang out with Eris's mom and getting some more hints that there might be some more further plot developments with this lovely lady, we get to walk through Junktown and then have a brief respite in a park, where a girl we met yesterday starts wanting to talk about the ex-boyfriend we remind her of. Then, before that scene can get any hotter, we spot Tifa. As such, the plot thickens, and Eris, having doubled down on her decision to involve herself in this plot, immediately departs to acquire the details of this thickness. The thickness leads us into a wacky, sleazy red light zone, where an assortment of hijinks land Cloud in a pervert's mansion, dressed as a girl. Tifa reveals that she's not actually fallen in love with said pervert, but merely seeks the pervert's information. The pervert reveals the information readily, in response to threats of irreparable damage towards his testicles. The Shinra Corporation plans to destroy Avalanche by destroying Sector 7. However, our party is then waylaid by traps, and we get a cutscene reinforcing Shinra's callous evil. After spending a little bit of time fighting a sewer goblin and running around a defunct train yard that's filled with ghosts, our three heroes arrive at the Sector 7 pillar just in the nick of time. Eris departs to save Marlene, while Cloud and Tifa depart to assist Barret in burying any punks who intend their home civic disasterian levels of harm. Upon their ascent of the pillar's support structure, the player will come to their final encounters with Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and the player is presented with their final opportunity to be chummy or callous towards these characters. And if you choose to be mean to them, then you are a monster, and you are not invited to any of my birthday parties. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse exist to be named characters whose sole plot function is to die in this exact sequence. And you know what? I think the game earns it. Upon summiting the peak of the pillar, our good friend Barret exalts us. In our imaginations, his pained face twists with the flickers of amazement, gratitude, and maybe even a little bit of hope. This hope is instantly dashed. His and everybody else's best efforts fail. Eris is captured. The suit-clad in Sony Yakuza carry her away via helicopter just after they set the pillar to splinters. Countless civilians are killed. Reduced to an anguish so intense that it devours his ability to form coherent sentences, Barret cries out the names of the people he has lost, the people he's failed, the people he got into this mess. Shock and grief turn into expletives, grunts, and cries. Barret feels a pain older and deeper than words, or even bizarre artificial limbs. Our big friend shouts at the heavens. What's it all for? Why has Barret suffered all he suffered just to end up here, staring again at the corpse of his life? The stars, as always, keep their answers to themselves. Barret gives a final burst of impotent rage at the unmoving world and collapses to the ground. As many minutes as our imaginations decide upon later, Barret is spurred by hope. Though 50% of his comrades have fallen, his daughter just might live. Our group ventures through familiar towns with familiar residents just as stunned as we are, to the serene slopes of Eris's house. Eris's mother person Elmira punches us in the face with knowledge. Eris is an ancient. Being an ancient means that Eris possesses special powers, and recent circumstances have had Eris place herself into danger for the sake of Marlene. Our heroes resolve to rescue her. Barret, out of gratitude that this stranger got herself into a whole heap of trouble to save his little Marlene. Tifa, because this stranger got herself into a whole heap of trouble just to help her milk some information out of a pervert. And Cloud, because it turns out that Cloud's the kind of guy who cares a lot. Having already traversed a number of dangers that would reduce the average person to incurable bouts of PTSD, our begrudging co-workers of characters have decided that maybe they would like it better if they were buds. And they've also decided that despite her present absence, Eris is in the Bud Club, and buds do not leave buds in the dust. And so, after running through several handcrafted field screens and enduring 2 different variants of puzzles for babies, the intrepid trio arrives at the base of the Shinra Tower, the diseased heart of the mega metropolis of Midgar, the hulking home of the machine against which we rage, and the current captors of the certified 4th member of the Buddy-Brigade, Eris, whom we've known for 2 in-game days. Our heroes pause before the set-piece climax of the Midgar section to ask the player which version of this section's opening they would like to experience. While the stairs option is admittedly smarter, the tone it adopts is deflatingly silly. Therefore, I always embrace the righteous anger embodied by my good friend Barret, and I recklessly throw myself into the fire. A series of battles against faceless Shinra Company mooks propel us into an elevator. Cloud and Barret celebrate a little moment of friendship curiosity during this proverbial eye in the proverbial storm. The player is quietly invited to contrast this scene with the last time that Cloud and Barret rode in an elevator together. Back then, they couldn't even get through one literal sentence without jumping down each other's proverbial throats. Now, while they're not exactly building campfires and rubbing their bellies together, the softness which our imaginations impart upon their words make us feel very deeply that a lot has happened, and the incompleteness of their expressed friendliness gives to us the impression that a lot is going to happen. But then, reprieve is definitionally cut short, and we cut back to cacophonously crafting fresh corpses to capriciously decorate this cold, callous corporation's contiguously congruent lobbies. A series of handcrafted field screens and puzzles for toddlers land us in a bathroom. We use that bathroom to pull ourselves into the ceiling. Merging with the ceiling gives to us the clandestine means to eavesdrop upon the evil machinations of this evil corporation's evil overlords. Each of the 6 members of Shinra's senior staff is given ample opportunity to express the essence of their characters. President Shinra, at all times a man's man, a self-made man, and an Ayn Randian man, is only ever matter-of-factly self-interested. Palmer is childish, our imaginations imparting upon him an implied nepotism. Heidegger and Scarlet chuckingly revel in their violent power over others. Reeve is concerned, though his concerns are routinely buried in the stark disconcern of his colleagues, as well as his relative lack of power. Then we get to meet Hojo. Hojo is quietly terrifying. One gets the impression that he is the proverbial Darth Vader in this very real boardroom. The dark scientist announces his dispassionate plan to breed Eris as one would breed a Class C female green chocobo named Wubbis in hopes of rearing an offspring of greater potential. Eris's current triplet status of being a human person, being the latest member of our budding Buddy-Brigade, and being in the position of distress compel us to a particular brand of heroic disgust at this propositional husbandry. Our disgust strengthens our resolve. Cloud hints at a personal familiarity he has with this Hojo character that is going to erupt loudly from the plot much later. With that aside, we rush to our friend's aid, though we're not in such a hurry that we can't stop in this hallway real quick and steal some powerful trinkets from wandering foes. Once we are satisfied with the hard edges and carbon bangles acquired, we get a scene in which Hojo engages with what appears to be an imprisoned sentient bag of nacho cheese Doritos. He refers to this sack of empty carbs and MSG as precious. With so many of our brain's synapses forever burdened with an eidetic memory-assisted encyclopedic knowledge of the Lord of the Rings, the word precious immediately floods our minds with thoughts of the creepy villainy of Gollum. Hojo's terrible posture and blasé attitude towards suggestive sex crimes certainly fit in with this wretched parallel. However, perhaps your brain associates the word precious with the 2009 film of the same name, directed by Lee Daniels, that I've never seen. However, Canada's favorite son, Adam Johnston, has seen it and didn't like it enough to make a whole YouTube video about it, and from that one video sprang an entire YouTube channel that you've probably already heard of. And you could say that Adam Johnson exists in the Pokemon badges of my influences. If it wasn't for that channel, I probably wouldn't be making this YouTube video. It's funny how things work out. Speaking of things working out, our quest to rescue Eris works out. We shoot at the tank and beat a boss and make a new buddy. Our new buddy coldly insists upon both the strict utilitarian and firmly tentative nature of his relationship with us. However, he does let us name him. This act makes us wonder if our first impressions of this new friend is going to be complicated by future story developments. Cloud, being neither a renowned creative thinker nor counted among the very wise, just sticks with the name that Hojo gave him. However, if he were a wizened creative thinker, he could have named him Little Buddy, Tank Boy, Bombus, or Dog Friend. Cloud, Barret, Eris, Tifa, and Dog Friend's victory is short-lived. And our rivals in the Sony Yakuza, having surely stumbled upon the 40 or so corpses we've left in our wake, catch us on the elevator. Their chief executive, who smoked a cigar over the burning corpses of hundreds of townspeople mere in-game hours previous, invites us to his executive suite to be the audience to his villainous motive monologue. He punctuates his gloating with a clarification of his master plan. His master plan reeks of the filth which permeates all rich people's plans. He wants to do what he's already done, but bigger, and at the expense of even more people. Our crew, somberly facing what is almost assuredly their final night in this mortal coil, enjoy a litany of conversation topics. We get to learn a little bit more about all of our new friends. However, sleep sees their fortunes reversed. They are sprung free and marvel at the fresh corpses which somebody else has used to decorate the Shinra building. Stricken with literal morbid curiosity, they follow the blood trail to the cold body of the man who had so joyfully gloated at them mere in-game hours ago. President Shinra is dead, impaled upon a sword, which can only belong to... Up to this exact point, Sephiroth has only existed in third-person references by characters who do not elaborate much further than that name drop. Now, Sephiroth has entered the stage in a fascinating way. He has, in essence, single-handedly achieved everything that we in the Buddy-Brigade have struggled and failed to achieve for the entirety of this story's tenure. Our crew has so far engaged in 2 operations against the Shinra Corporation. First is Operation Blast Furnace, which ended in abject failure, resulting in only 25% of the mission objectives being completed and the deaths of 3 members for a mortality rate of 50%, the destruction of Avalanche HQ, and the adjacent deaths of an ultimately undisclosed but imaginatively hundreds or even thousands of civilian casualties. Second is Operation Rescue Eris, which has also ended in abject failure. Despite initial success, the crew was ultimately captured by Shinra, and Eris ended up no closer to reaching the state of being rescued. Then, this guy Sephiroth shows up, infiltrates the Shinra Tower, effortlessly murks a handful of suits, and kills the head honcho of the company off-screen. He doesn't even stick around to villainously motive monologue at us. He just leaves, and leaves behind the evidence of his work. This is something uniquely brilliant about the character of Sephiroth, his distinctively purposeful menace. More than merely witnessing his ill deeds or being shown the extent of his power through elaborately animated cutscenes, we are instead made to feel his power through implication. One of the things about Sephiroth that nobody talks about is that he's not that interesting of a character. The interest he generates is more in his role as a nefarious force. The original Final Fantasy VII understands this. Sephiroth's appearances are sparse. Kind of like the shark in Jaws, we instead mainly interact with the aftermath of his action. And, like the shark in Jaws, whenever Sephiroth appears, the body count rises. In fact, there's only 2 instances in which the character of Sephiroth shows up where he doesn't kill anybody. Speaking of a rising body count, what's also rising are the imagined hairs on the back of Cloud's Lego Blobman model neck. This is as close to panicking as we've seen the stoic ex-soldier. Even when hanging on the precipice of death, even when witnessing destruction on a sectarian scale, even when hopelessly locked in a cell, awaiting what would almost assuredly be his state-sponsored execution, Cloud has thus far mostly maintained his cool. Now he loses his cool at the mere specter of Sephiroth's presence. That's pretty interesting. Long before the player has been given any explicit information to understand this rivalry, we are made to feel the conflict between Cloud and Sephiroth. From offhanded mentions, to trembling in his wake, to pursuing him actively, to being awed by his power, to tracking him down into the depths of the very earth, into putting him into the dirt where he belongs, Final Fantasy VII does everything in its power to make you feel the tension between the pro and antagonist with every fiber of your being. And it earns it, baby. Final Fantasy VII earns its iconic rivalry. Final Fantasy VII makes what would be silly moments in another story captivating. Through punctuated use of subtlety and implication, Final Fantasy VII carefully crafts itself to earn its over-the-top, ridiculous final boss battle, complete with its deliciously bombastic fanfare. From the one-note drone heartbeat of his theme, to its simple, villainous overture, to the grandeur of a choir and orchestra, Sephiroth infects Final Fantasy VII's plot little by little, drip by drip, like chocolate syrup, spreading expertly over a bowl of Bluebell brand homemade vanilla bean ice cream. And it is delicious. Sephiroth has not risen to his status as an icon just because he's got a big sword and he's got ridiculous hair and he's got long flowing black clothes. Lord knows Japan has produced no shortage of such characters. No, Sephiroth earned his place as an icon because of the story's impeccable structure, which has made us feel his menace. Here's the lesson. You do not make the audience care about a character solely through their character design. You make them care through meticulously crafted storytelling. Storytelling good enough can even make you care about little blob-handless blob monster men. Neat camera tricks, evocative character design, and cutscenes so visually stunning that they literally burned into my brain can make a good story great, but they can't be the story. So here let me pause to tell you that we, the Final Fantasy VII lovers, do not love Final Fantasy VII despite its graphics. We love it because it's a good story. Final Fantasy VII would be a good story even if you told it with paper-mache characters. And I, like many of you, don't have the fondest things to say about the broader compilation of Final Fantasy VII universe, and also like you, I like to histrionically blame the whole thing on Tetsuya Nomura, because he's a convenient face to put against, all the stuff that irritates me. But also, while we'll pause here for a moment, let me clarify my position on Tetsuya Nomura. I both like and respect the man. He's incredible at what he does, and there is a good reason why he's accrued so much pedigree in his company. I do not actually hold him personally responsible for everything I don't like about the post-7 Final Fantasy games or the non-original Final Fantasy VII broader universe games. I just like being unreasonably mad for fun. I just think impotent, unreasonable anger is funny. And I think it would be funny if someone, in this case me, held Tetsuya Nomura as personally responsible for everything that I find disappointing or lackluster about the latter-day Final Fantasy VII games. It's a joke. Try out joking. It's fun. Go ahead and post unreasonably angry comments defending Tetsuya Nomura in this video. Say something crazy like, you can't blame Tetsuya Nomura for, the Vietnam War. It wasn't his fault. Something like yell at me for something stupid. Or you can go the opposite way in that you can hold him as personally responsible for everything bad that happens in your life personally. Like, you had a plate of pancakes that was disappointing. It's Tetsuya Nomura's fault. Or if you're feeling sweet and kind, you can hold him personally responsible for everything that you do like about the latter-day Final Fantasy VII games. This is your invitation to get in stupid, dumb, pointless, angry fights in the comment section with me. Let's confuse the pants off of anybody who hasn't watched up to this point in the video. Please leave something super ridiculous down there, please. It's one of the best parts of having a YouTube channel. But don't take any of this stuff super seriously. But you know who you should take seriously? Rufus Shinra. I like Rufus Shinra a lot. With the exception of Reeve, so far, every single Shinra company executive has been a bombastically, cartoonishly evil caricature of corporate evil. Then Rufus steps in as the truest, most human of corporate evil. Dispassionate, ruthless, single-mindedly driven, and deadly serious. The guy can't even pretend for a second that he's sad that his father's corpse is currently rotting in literally the next room. He can see it through this window. His first thought is,
how do I make this situation profitable for myself?
And he's hot. Look at that fashion sense. I think I'd be more amiable to the encroaching corporate apocalypse if Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk could at least muster the energy to be good looking and dress cool. Let's introduce some anime villainishness to our real life corporate goons, please. In any event, this new president of Shinra Incorporated reminds me of somebody else who's just about getting ready to start his character arc. Cloud, our lovably jerkish mercenary, is beginning to think about other people. He does what Rufus would never do. He places himself precipitously in harm's way for the benefit of his budding buds. I think Cloud might be growing up, and I wonder if he'll grow into the role of a true, unironic, unbironic hero by story's end. Our other buds in the Buddy-Brigade escape, while Cloud fights a wonderfully dressed man, a dog with a tail on its head, and a helicopter that I swear shoots at you if you let this battle go on for too long. Like, I swear this happened to me once. Like, I've never been able to have it happen again, so it might have just happened in my imagination. But anyway, as the buds are fleeing, Tifa volunteers to stay behind and wait for Cloud, though does not volunteer to go back up to the 70th floor balcony and turn this 3-on-1 into a 3-on-2. Thank you, Tifa, for your minimum contribution to our our friendship. The rest of the game fights a boss, and then another boss, and then hits a dead end on the first floor. Our big friend Barret, his gun arm blasting bullets at the battalions of Shinra soldiers intent upon his new friend's capture, decides it is his turn to step into the role of self-sacrificing good bud. He, in so many words, announces that he will fight to the death to defend Eris as repayment for her being nice to his little girl Marlene. What a swell guy. God, I love Barret. I love Barret so much.
Well, you know what would be nicer than any of that?
Says Tifa, sprinting subtly down a set of stairs.
If we got in this car and drove away.
We are next punched in the face with a slick, meaty, delicious cutscene of our heroes driving cars indoors. Good, that's not where you're supposed to drive cars. And then we fearlessly burst forth from a 4th-story window onto a highway below. One arcade game and boss fight later, our heroes face an uncertain sunrise. In a brief scene of respite, they reaffirm their vows both to each other and to the burgeoning plot of Final Fantasy VII. We are leaving Midgar for the big unknown. However, just before we delve into that unknown, the story pauses for a second to make an important down payment. Final Fantasy VII's opening hours are distinctively film-like. Linear, action-focused, and constructed out of set pieces. In other words, Final Fantasy VII's opening Midgar section is a film that you play, though given its length, it's more like a season of television that you play. Now here at the edge of Midgar, Final Fantasy VII is preparing to set you loose, to give up the reins, to settle you down sweetly into the pacing of a video game. While Final Fantasy VII never quite gives up its film-like pacing until the conclusion of Cloud's backstory, it does make its first major pace change right here. The player is given the smallest opportunity to hang out with these characters. For as long as we're willing to linger here upon the barren outskirts of Midgar, the player can chat and chill with their newfound buddies in the Buddy-Brigade. Here, we see Final Fantasy VII gently coaxing all the lessons that it learned from the former day Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VI in particular, back into itself. It is both old and new, both a return to places beloved and a bold venture into the unknown. Final Fantasy VII is a book that you play, although sometimes it's a movie you watch, and sometimes it's a movie that you play, and sometimes it's a movie you direct. But it is always purely a video game. And as a wise man once said, video games are books that are also movies. So, after we take the time to wander on the world map a little bit and get the rockets out of your butt attack from these robot cars on legs, our heroes convene in the town of Calm for conversation. Calm is aptly named, for this is the hors d'oeuvres for Final Fantasy VII's second section. The Season 2, if you will. Season 1, as I said, was an action-packed, fast-paced action thriller, which mainly aped films and focused on set pieces. Season 2 is a slow-paced, hang-out-alicious pursuit story that is mainly a video game, mostly the video game Final Fantasy VI. The player will now venture to towns where the goal is to get to the end of that town's section. However, Final Fantasy VII does intelligently use this downtime to explore both its characters and its world. It's no surprise that, before the conclusion of this section, we will meet the remaining party members and explore the elaborate backstories of our entire party. One of the things I love most about Final Fantasy VII is that despite being mostly about Cloud, I mean, look at that haircut, of course it's about Cloud, but the narrative still takes the time to give every other character at least one section of the story that's about them. Final Fantasy VII's cast really stands out in my mind because of this fact. It's a simple trick, really. It's the same trick that Chrono Trigger and Mass Effect 2 pulled. If you want to make the player care about a party member, you make a few quests which are solely about that character. First up in our town section buffet romp is the Calm section, which is all about Cloud. We get to learn all about Cloud and his elaborate backstory through an elaborately designed, playable flashback sequence. I'm going to issue a second big spoiler warning now. I know I had a whole spiel at the beginning of the video, but you know, people don't listen to that. Sometimes you gotta say things twice. So if you've made it this far and any of this sounds like a good time to you, stop this video right now and go out and play the original Final Fantasy VII. You only get one chance to discover Final Fantasy VII's intricate plot secrets for yourself. You know, don't waste that opportunity. Like, come on, man. If you even think for a single second that you like any amount of Final Fantasy VII, just buy it and play it. You'll like it. It's like in the video game canon. So get on that. Anywho, for those of us in the know, and for those of us who have blatantly ignored the previous spoiler warning, it's like, seriously, just go play the game, man. Name Red 13 Dog Friend when you get there. Send a screenshot to me of you naming Red 13 Dog Friend, and I'll know you're having a good time. Anyway, those of us in the know that this is actually the first of 3 times we'll be returning to this particular flashback event, and that this first version is mostly inaccurate. It's not that Cloud is lying per se, it's more that he has a bad case of the brain mumbles. We'll go into more depth about Cloud's brain mumbles in a later section. Suffice it to say for now that Cloud's brain mumbles are going to have serious impact on the story. Those of you who are in the know exactly what I'm talking about. Those of you not in the know who blatantly ignored my spoiler warning are going to have to wait a little bit to find out. Cloud tells us the story of what we in the Final Fantasy VII fandom call the Nibelheim incident, a tragic series of events which plunge his hometown into an inferno, plunges several of both his and Tifa's loved ones irrevocably into the dirt, and plunges silver-haired, silver-tongued bad boy Sephiroth into irredeemable villainy. To make a long story short, Cloud and Sephiroth go to Nibelheim alongside two blue-shirted nobodies. After doing a bit of talking and doing a bit of sleeping, Cloud, Sephiroth, Tifa, and the two nobodies hike up a mountain. The bridge breaks, plunging one of the blue-shirted nobodies straight into the afterlife. Our heroes afford this person no eulogy, citing lack of time. However, they do have a bit of time to nonsense babble some exposition on materia. Apparently, it's a bunch of dead people's memories or something. Perhaps memory is a major theme of Final Fantasy VII, and this theme would resonate with a boy who has an eidetic memory and is trapped remembering everything. Anywho, our erstwhile heroes get to the Mako reactor atop Mount Nibel and find out that it's full of
Sinister Shinra secrets.
This unseemly sight of such abominations sends our senpai Sephiroth into a foreboding bout of self-doubt. He worries that he's the product of sinister secrets. This sparks him into wanting nothing more in the world than to read about Shinra secrets. And so he goes into a basement and learns all about the sinister Shinra secrets, which led to his creation. Cloud, meanwhile, goes to bed. After waking up from his bed, Cloud goes to see how Sephiroth's madness is coming along. Turns out, as indicated by his unprompted foreboding laughter, he's all done going mad. Sephiroth does the villainous action version of stretching his calves by delivering an expositional villain motive monologue. An indeterminate but imagined several days worth of reading materials has granted upon him eldritch knowledge that he is in fact the product of sinister Shinra secrets. The Shinra company's science suits built themselves a test tube baby in order to recreate the Cetra race, presumably so that the Cetra could guide them to the promised land and portly profits. With his prevalent disconnect from humanity now given shape, Sephiroth announces his allegiance to a new master, his mother, Jenova. A recent encounter with Jenova in the present informs us that she is some kind of metahuman headless spook with an eyeball for a nipple. She does not seem the sort of mother who will guide her children towards a life of caring for others. Cloud quickly gives chase to Sephiroth, but not so quickly that Sephiroth doesn't get the chance to set the entire town ablaze and murder all but two of its residents. Needing no further information to convince himself of his senpai's present descent into villainy, Cloud sprints up a mountain and into a foreboding building, which seems to be the best place for a hero-villain epic standoff. Tifa also has a mind to revenge murk Sephiroth, but being neither a trained swordsperson nor possessive of shinobi-esque stealth techniques, her ill-fated plan fates illy, and she receives a life-threatening wound of some description. With hollowed, pained screams and gushing blood echoing throughout our imaginations, we watch as Cloud enters the scene. Cloud has a choice to make between revenge and helping a friend. He chooses revenge. Tifa brainlocks this incident and promises herself that should Cloud find himself at the proverbial business end of the proverbial shotgun, she will find herself something better to do. Sephiroth has also found something better to do, that is, murdering all the humans and retaking the planet for the deceased Cetra. His opponent's Oedipal objectives no longer obfuscated, Cloud announces that is the end of their friendship, and that the present circumstances now compel him to attempt Sephiroth's murder. However, this climactic moment is denied to both the audience and to the characters in the story. They ponder aloud several dangling threads which at the moment have no answers. This is Final Fantasy VII's way of slapping a "remember this, we're gonna get back to this later" sticker all over this scene. In fact, the true conclusion to this scene denotes the emotional climax of the entire game. We'll get to experience that climax in Season 4, but for now, this is the end of Season 1. Well, now that we've learned all about how a supernaturally strong arsonist katana murdered Cloud and Tifa's whole town, we get to take a little vacation on a chocobo farm. Its vibrant greenery and rustic guitar melodies punctuate this location's lack of industry. We are as far away now from Midgar's Mako reactors and steel beam civic structure as we have ever been, and the farmstead's rolling green hills and material-rewarding chocobo dance just might make us feel as though we've gone a long way. But not so long a way as to escape the unsatisfying unsatisfiable maws of capitalism. After an elder man named William overcharges us to sleep in his bed, a child also named William overcharges us for giant bird capture apparatuses. Their co-William sales pitch being, buy these things or get eaten by the giant snake. We are then tutorialized for an optional yet voluminous side quest, which we won't even be able to begin to complete until much, much later. We then trick a bird into being a horse it across a swamp, part with it forever, then marvel at a giant deceased snake corpse, which has been slam-dunked Shaq-style upon a tree. The culprit is an assumed Sephiroth, again showcasing how this guy can just slice through the challenges that we ourselves must engage in expensive bird-catching minigames to avoid. After picking up some of the trash left behind in Mithril Mines...
Ooh, is that a Tolkien reference?
Mithril.
Except the English translator shoved a gratuitous Y in there. Why did he do that? Was he afraid of getting a cease and desist letter from the Tolkien estate? Or did he not know this was a Tolkien reference? Am I to believe that a man who took the time to learn how to speak and write the entirety of the Japanese language at some point prior to 1997 had never heard of J.R.R. Tolkien and his magic metal named Mithril?
Mithril.
Anyways, we try to exit the mines to become face-to-face with our rivals in the Sony Yakuza, and they inform us that they're currently down one capital of Nevada and up one Vampire Diaries character. Vampire Diaries lets slip our next destination, much to her boss man Tsang's displeasure. We are later informed that Vampire Diaries has the hots for boss man Tsang, except Tsang was an adult man back when the currently 22-year-old Eris Gainsborough was but a tiny child. So, if we assume that baby child Eris is 12 years old at this scene, while adult man Tsang is a Turk recruit at a fresh-faced 25, that would make him 15 years older than most of the principal cast. Thus, he is somewhere in his late 30s or early 40s, and that would make him something like 10-15 years older than Vampire Diaries. Ooh, did somebody say daddy? Then again, the Final Fantasy VII Remake makes no distinction between past and present day Tsang and its models during its rendition of the baby child Eris scene, even though it does that for Elmira. Is this to imply that Tsang has not visibly aged in 15 years? Is Tsang immortal? Is Tsang a vampire? In any event, Big Daddy Boss Man Tsang gets a touching little scene where he expresses as much concern for Eris as his cold professionalism will allow. We later learn that he likes Eris, which, didn't you know her when she was a child? Aren't you, like, twice as old as she is? It's a little gross, don't you think? But I suppose such spouse husbandry would be par for the course for a vampire. Upon exiting the mines forever, we are greeted with a large tower jutting from the earth, upon which is some low polygon equivalent of a large bird. Such serves as a beacon to the wander curious. This is the game throwing up a big sign that says,
Would you like to take a break from the story and see what this tower with this bird is all about?
well, it turns out it's all about being a place to intermittently play a tower defense minigame that's both not very fun and easy to cheese. But I like this location for 3 reasons. 1, it serves as a setup for a story event we're not going to return to until much later. 2, it shows that anti-Shinra resistance groups are not limited to a mere Midgar-centric glee club. With a current mortality rate of 37.5%, the world is larger and broader than that. Shinra's nominal world takeover is not as absolute as its suit-laden propagandists would like for you to think. And 3, they let you sleep in these comfy-looking beds for free. And look at those precious little quilts. Even the Chocobo's William wouldn't let me sleep in their house for free, despite their interest in my business. Anywho, after running past the first forests, which present one their first opportunity to forest search for Yuffie so they can add her to their roster of party members they never use, we arrive at Junon, or at least the little seaside village whose residents all but state predates the giant terraced metropolis which has evidently been built during their lifetime. Wowee, Shinra's construction department must be putting a lot of overtime in order to build this hulking thing in such a short time to have the local residents remember it being built. For example, I lived in Denton, Texas for 10 years, and in that time they managed to build one building and repave 2 of the city's 390 crumbling, pothole-laden roads. This Shinra Inc. can sure make the trains run on time. After chatting up the village's 4 elderly residents to our heart's content, we can head down to the beach to meet the only child in town, just as she's getting attempted drown murdered by one of the few boss monsters who gets a field model. After we murder this flying fish thing, we blow air into an unconscious child's mouth for what feels like ages. Then, an ingratiated elderly woman lets us sleep in her house. Where's she gonna sleep? Anywho, that mysterious voice appears in Cloud's head for the penultimate time to remind us to keep that whole Nibelheim incident thing in the back of our conscious thought, while also reminding us that while we've received Cloud's perspective on such events, we have not seen Tifa's. Tifa rebuffs on the opportunity to spill her beans at this juncture in the story, informing we, the audience, that we must complete more amazing set pieces before we're allowed to get that sweet, sweet tea. This episode's set pieces involve whistling at a dolphin, marveling at an airship, dressing up like a Shinra grunt, and performing a cute little dance for our big rival Rufus Shinra, in which we are always rewarded with trinkets, despite the fact that we gave the objectively worst performance. I've always appreciated this Junon set piece. Not only is this the first metropolis we've visited outside of Midgar, but we've also been introduced to several plot points which will not become relevant until much later, such as the airship, the cannon, and even the underwater reactor. Plus, I've always appreciated this video game dungeon's unorthodox structure. After all, we found the boss of the level right in the beginning, and there are no other battles throughout the duration of this set piece. Instead, we just got to hang out and learn a little bit more about Rufus Shinra, and we even got some cute hangout moments with some Shinra Company mooks, which is almost enough to make me feel bad for slaughtering so many of them en masse. Speaking of cute hangout moments, once we get on this boat, we get some precious chill time with our buds in the budding Buddy-Brigade. After one mandatory conversation with each of them, we land upon the most pertinent, Barret's. The story is getting ready to have a little Barret spotlight episode, which it foreshadows here with his Shinra-directed rage. I also appreciate this little name drop of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, our fallen comrades. Though hyper-minor characters, they did mean enough to Barret that their ghosts haunt his memory. I wonder if we're preparing to meet any more of Barret's ghosts. But before that, we have to squeeze in a quick little 30-minute meeting with Cloud's ghosts. A Phantom-esque Sephiroth materializes from the floor of the engine room, having apparently gained the abilities of levitation and object permeation in the 5 years since he burned Nibelheim to the ground, adding another hairline fracture to the stability of Cloud's story. Future plot points rendered on the back burner of our brains are beginning to boil over. We get to fight Jenova, who turns out to be some kind of big monster with her own unique boss battle music. Her grotesque aspect instills in one doubts about her nature. Like, you might think to yourself,
Maybe Jenova is not an ancient.
after all, our good friend Eris is an ancient, and she doesn't transform into a skeleton-faced goop monster, vis-a-vis John Carpenter's The Thing. I wonder if this will have any impact on future plot revelation. Well, in any event, after we're done with our little spooktacular cruise ship, and before we can get too swept up in any of this burgeoning plot information, it's time to go on vacation. With plot lines pulsating palpably in the back burner of our brains, Final Fantasy VII offers us now, again, a little time to hang out. While one could simply flee right out of Costa del Sol's front gate, why not stop and chat up the various members of the Buddy-Brigade and see how their little baby character arcs are coming along? We also can view this optional cutscene in which resident mad scientist man Hojo foreshadows a future event in the story. He's surrounded by beautifully besmitten women, even though he's an ugly, unpleasant, unkempt man who probably smells bad, and he's sunbathing in his full scientist garb because that's funny. Also, did you know that present-day Hojo only appears 4 times in the entirety of Final Fantasy VII? That's a surprisingly limited on-screen presence for a guy who has such a central role in ruining so many people's lives. Once we've concluded having our Costa del Fun in the sun, we get to make our way through the winding Corellian vales of Mount Corel. Mount Coral? Mount Corral? Mount Carl? Anywho, Mount Carl serves as a gateway to one of my favorite things about Final Fantasy VII. As much as Cloud and Sephiroth's rivalry has sticky homoerotic marketing appeal, one cannot help but become attached to the entire entourage. Perhaps interestingly more than other titles in the same series. After all, there's no terrible Zeldinked spin-off title. And while yes, it is psychologically possible for any person to become emotionally attached to literally anything, including things which will definitely kill them, and while it is also true that a multitude of contributing factors have culminated in the exceeding love for Final Fantasy VII, beyond any other entry in the franchise, to the utter befuddlement of the series' makers, I argue that the load-bearing structure of this ensemble appreciation is the sleek employment of simple techniques. Every party member in Final Fantasy VII gets a little vignette in which they are the focus of the story. Mix that ingredient with the implicit, relatable thematic tendrils present in every aspect of Final Fantasy VII's plot, and you have yourself a character the public will cheer for when their high-fidelity 3D model is revealed at an E3 event. As stated previously, the upcoming section is all about Barret. One even gets cute little unique interactions with Barret should one choose to include him in their party during their ascension and traversal across Mount Corel. Mount Corel represents a fun little nature tour, as well as our third instance of the industrial punk Shinra technology being built parasitically atop a pre-existing infrastructure, to the detriment of those pre-existing infrastructure's makers. Such a notion settles upon our minds that the Shinra company is parasitizing this planet, both ecologically and sociopolitically, in the exact same way that, say, the errant cells of an enigmatic space being we don't need Tetsuya Nomura to explain, is slowly parasitizing Cloud's personality. Palpable enough is the implication that even the dullest observer can place into consciousness the idea that Shinra sucks. Also, the people of Mount Corel built their rail lines in roller coaster tycoon configurations for some reason. I guess one has to spice up that morning commute somehow. We next arrive in and are immediately struck by the stark poverty of North Corel. If we have Barret in our party, we are treated to a scene in which the townspersons accost and berate our boisterous friend. Contrary to our pre-established estimations of Barret's personality, he responds to such assailants meekly and timidly. Our surprised befuddlement at our big friend's sudden sullen disposition is elucidated at the train station, in which Barret explains that Cloud and Tifa are not the only persons in this brigade to have suffered hometown arson. Unlike Cloud and Tifa, however, Barret sees himself as at least a little bit responsibility adjacent to Corel's destruction. Such internalized guilt is the source of his sudden solemn demeanor, and one suspects has been routinely sublimated into righteous anger. But before we can get wrapped up in all that drama, our heroes board a smooth-looking tram that takes them to the Gold Saucer. A wacky cutscene welcomes us to the theme park, a high-tech, high-stakes Six Flags casino which has been built over a desert prison and is only accessible via a crumbling slum. This sparkling Disney world is our third invocation of a gentrified luxury zone being built atop older ruins, with these ruins in particular being specifically the corpses of Barret's former life. Considering he has a deadly Gatling gun welded onto his person, he handles it pretty well, venting with a simple emotional outburst. We are then given the objective of selecting a non-Barret party member to explore the park with. The only missable event is an encounter with the Gold Saucer's larger-than-life muscle-bound owner and operator, Dio. While demonstrating his evidently lax, laissez-faire approach to dress code, he foreshadows a major MacGuffin which will be relevant later in the story. Also to be relevant later in the story is our next applicant in the Buddy-Brigade, Kate Sith. Or, Ket She? Sorry, I'm gonna call him Kate Sith. Kate Sith is a fortune-telling machine, which I guess means we're supposed to assume he's some kind of robot? And after delivering to us a cryptic, foreboding forecast into the impending future, he decides to put in his resignation and join our team. And he joined at just the perfect time to get framed with us when Daddy Dio attempts to arrest us for shooting up the battle arena with the guns that we don't have. Evidently, the punishment for suspicion of second-degree murder is death by desert exile. All in all, Kate Sith takes his Buddy-Brigade inaugurational prison sentence pretty well. It's almost like being locked up in prison or dying horribly from something coming down at you are among the necessary qualifications to be in this Buddy-Brigade. Or you could say that Kate Sith has ulterior motives or something. We catch up with Barret, who's also doing time. But honestly, I never understood how he got down here. Like, did he break into the battle arena, murder a bunch of people, then throw himself down this gate? I mean, I've always just kind of assumed that the Veil of Aaron prison gate is behind this door in the battle arena. But, I mean, like, well, I guess that's what he got down here? I guess that's what he's doing? But then again, how do you know about who and what was down here? Thankfully, we meet up again with Barret, and he answers none of these questions. And upon being asked if he's the battle arena murderer, he shakes his head and tells of another gun-handed man. So I guess Dine took an elevator all the way up to the Gold Saucer and shot all these people, and then came all the way back down. But, like, why? Is this something he does regularly? Is he a regular employee on Dio's payroll? And if this kind of thing is something that Dine is wont to do, then how come Dio isn't all like,
"Oh dang nabbit, that Wackadine character shot up me employees again. This is gonna cost me a pretty penny in workers' comp."
well, perhaps maybe this is Dine's first casual Gold Saucer massacre. If so, what did he wait around so long for? I mean, he's been around these parts for long enough to become the prison boss, and the prison boss is evidently the one who gets to decide if prisoners are allowed to chicken race for their freedom or not. So, did Dine just so happen to serendipitously serial murder the very day that his ex-best friend Barret showed up? Anyway, Barret tells us a story about how he and his ex-best friend Dine got their arms shot off by Shinra soldiers. Both men then independently decided to channel their anguish into the weaponry body mod scene, which is like, pretty convenient. maybe they used to talk about this kind of thing regularly? Like, Dine was all like,
Hey, Barret.
and Barret was all like,
Yeah.
and Dine was all like,
What'd you do if our homes got massacred or arson and you became a broken man beset by rage and despair?
I'd strap a gun to my hand and then go wage guerrilla war against the folks who'd done it.
Strap a gun to your hand? Like, can't you just hold a gun in your hand? Like, ain't them guns designed to be held in one's hand? The strapping part ain't seeming necessary to me.
No, you don't understand me. The gun is my hand.
A gun for a hand?
Yeah,
Like you wielded the gun upon your very bone structure?
yeah.
Bro. That's badass. I like that.
well, after grinding in the junkyard for enemy skills, we confront the megalomaniacal Dine. This scene is fantastic, and it's an instance of one of my favorite tropes. Barret, our big friend, must confront a dark reflection of himself. Dine is a man who suffered the same tragedy, and became a collateral damage-inflicting, infrastructure-destroying monster. Barret, not exactly innocent of collateral damage-inflicting infrastructural destruction, is in danger of likewise becoming a monster and suffering Dine's fate. Despite the circumstances, Dine's choices have led him ultimately to self-destruction, and this is the fate which awaits Barret should he not come to terms with his own demons. Thus, the Barret-Dine battle is symbolically a man doing battle with himself. Upon the battle's conclusion, Dine's despair takes root. Upon the discovery of his daughter Marlene's survival, a revelation which would overjoy a psychologically healthy man, Dine fully confronts and fully sets into the man he has become. The man his daughter would hate. The man his daughter would fear. A man his daughter would be horrified to discover is her father. Unable to bear the crushing weight of what he's become any longer, Dine abdicates fathership to Barret and throws himself to his death. Barret screams at the sky, mourning the man that he had once loved. And once that's over, we get to race a giant chicken. Then, the Disney World manager slash jail warden Dio grants us a full pardon and gives to us a fancy car. With the world once again at our doorstep, I wonder what depressing revelations await us. As such, almost immediately after being sprung from prison and gifted a wacky car, we are presented an opportunity to make a pit stop by some ruins where we face off against our rivals in the Sony Yakuza. Witness a quick cutscene with scantily clad Scarlet and Big Daddy Boss Man Head Vampire Sang, which foreshadows future plot developments, and then we enter the quaint village of Gongaga. Prominent amid its melancholy is a ruined reactor. A few cursory conversations with various townspersons confirms the visual storytelling. This sleepy little village fell victim to shoddy Mako reactor construction, resulting in an explosion which claimed many lives, and precipitated the townspeople in forsaking Mako energy in its entirety. Most notable among the little huts is this one, whose inhabitants beg of us information. Cloud's stark soldier features remind them of another soldier boy named Zack. That's my name. Cloud regards the name with a dismissive shrug, but should one have Eris and Tifa in their party, they will both respond to the invocation of such a name with a mysterious, despondent egress. Tifa notes shocking parallels between Cloud and this Zack character, and hints at further emotionality bubbles that she is not quite prepared to pop. Eris, on the other hand, is much more emotionally forward. She plainly states that this Zack character was an object of her affection, who at some point 5 years previously had ceased all contact with her, leading her to assume that he had moved on to another lady friend. However, she also notes that he's been missing. I just gotta say, Eris, isn't it a little harsh to assume that your boyfriend person Zack ghosted you to chase additional tail and not say due to the occupational hazards of being a soldier, his bullet-ridden corpse leaking his life's blood upon the barren soil of outer Midgar? Maybe it's just me, but I would sooner worry that my soldier boyfriend's unexplained absence was due to some kind of battlefield mortality rather than any floozy philandering. But in any case, nobody tells Zack's worried parents any of this. And indeed, no one mentions this subject again as we cruise on our way to Cosmo Canyon. Holy macaroni, it's Cosmo Canyon. Cosmo Canyon presents us with what is perhaps our first true hangout time outside of Calm, and maybe Costa del Sol, though that hangout sesh is perfectly skippable. Entering this place always strikes me with its enviable oddity. It is, perhaps more than any other settlement in Final Fantasy VII, the anti-Midgar, a place of wooden huts, wind turbines, and an observatory. The location itself expresses a more nuanced aspect of Final Fantasy VII's themes of nature and industry. While clearly critical of Midgar and by extension the parasitic industrialization it represents, the story also allows for this place. Abodes, carved into canyon walls, lights powered by wind turbines, and a powerful observatory at its peak. Thus is industrialization framed not as wholly evil, but only evil upon its application. Midgar is commanded by forces which hope to exploit and profit off of life, whereas Cosmo Canyon's elders use their technology to understand and cultivate life. Thus, says Final Fantasy VII, evil comes from internal choices rather than external factors. Anyway, now it's Dogfriend's turn to get some character development. Dogfriend reveals that his true name is Nanaki, or as I called him when I was a child, Nanaki, and that his true nature is that of a young adult precipice-dwelling adolescent. Nanaki's floating and presumably adoptive grandfather Bugenhagen picks up the old man exposition stick and gets to explaining both the true maturation of his presumably adoptive lion dog grandson, as well as the full truth of Mako and the live stream. I've always enjoyed the way that Final Fantasy VII chooses to parse this information. We've been hearing about Mako and first-handedly witnessing its detrimental effects upon the lands and bodies of critters from the very beginning of the game. However, it is only now that its distinctly culturally Japanese true nature is elucidated. While Western media tends to have Judeo-Christian ideas and motifs manifest as a fixation upon an external evil which must be combated, defeated, and ultimately destroyed, the subconsciously Shinto aspects of the lifestream are made apparent with its dualism. When left to its natural devices, the lifestream manifests as a calm, regenerative force which culminates and creates life. Yet, when forcefully extracted for dubious purposes, the lifestream manifests in electric power, yes, but also in the landscape's degradation, malicious human augmentation, and a rise in monstrosity. Thus, Final Fantasy VII's themes lean more towards finding a balance with the other, rather than the righteous destruction of the evil. Also, I like this part where Bugenhagen sucks the life out of the earth, and it crumbles into dust and falls. Like, falls where? Shouldn't it fall towards the sun? Also, why is this elliptical out of whack? All these planetary orbits should be parallel. I'm gonna have to give you a big fat F in astronomy, Boogie, me old buddy. Anyway, once we're done learning the terrible truth of the world and how when our souls eventually go back into the big life stream, they'll get sucked into a Mako reactor and then burned presumably forever in order to turn the lights on, it's time to sit around a campfire and check in on the character development of our friends. Yuffie and Kate Sith inform us that they are not ready to have their plot-centric episodes just yet. Tifa bashfully hints at future developments with her stammering, awkward, obvious possession of secrets. Lockhart, am I right? By contrast, Barret seizes this opportunity to complete his character arc. After having spent the previous mandatory story section both figuratively and literally confronting his past, and seeing clearly the man he would have become, and the death that would have claimed him should he have continued down the path of compromiseless vengeance, Barret takes one last glance at the past before he plunges himself into the boundless future. He recalls all the pain he has felt in his life, all the pain he himself has caused. He acknowledges that he never really cared so much about the planet, but rather desired solely to spread the pain he feels to the people who destroyed his life. He further acknowledges that his actions have contributed to the destruction of other people's lives. While it would be callous to blanket blame Barret for the destruction of Sector 7 and thereby the deaths of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, he does carry responsibility adjacency. In any event, Barret blames himself. In a quiet moment of repose, our friend Barret is reckoning with the terrible clarity of hindsight. Undeniable to him now are the litany of his mistakes. And yet, from the darkest pits of his despair, Barret resolves to earn the forgiveness of his ghosts and finally become the man he has pretended to be for so many years. He proclaims that Avalanche is born again, but in truth, he's claiming that he is the one who is reborn. Another character who gets their character arc resolved in a appreciatedly quiet manner is Eris. Implicit in her earlier behavior and mannerisms, Eris is a deeply lonely person who has lost everyone and everything she has ever cared about. Her Cetra powers have granted to her an incredible gift, but they are also what divides her permanently from others. All her life she has tried to escape what she is, but no longer. Having seized upon the opportunity of self-discovery and self-understanding when standing upon the Midgarian precipice and gazing into the uncertain sunrise, her inquiries have brought her here, where the Cosmo Canyon elders have elucidated both the nature of the lifestream and her status as the sole remaining Cetra. With a simple turn of the head, Eris quietly accepts that her loneliness is unavoidable. She can hear and see and feel things that the others never can. There are burdens in this journey that she must shoulder alone. Next on the character arc completion train is our favorite dog friend, Red 13. Being nowhere near as important as Eris and nowhere near as interesting as Barret, Good Boy Dog Friend's character arc revolves around traversing a terrible dungeon, fighting a ghost, and then realizing that his dad was not a lame-o chicken butt coward man, but was actually a pretty cool guy who died heroically after being turned into a crying statue. This somehow imparts onto our little red buddy the wisdom that being an adult means you gotta stop pretending to be something you're not. After a little pep talk from Grandpa, he rejoins our group, where he will remain till the end. Also, is his dad alive up there? I mean, something was crying, right? Can't we, like, throw a soft on this guy and spring him loose? Or is he, like, likewise a ghost in the ghost cave who only temporarily occupied his own stony flesh to express one final connection with his son? I don't know. This cave sucks, and thankfully we don't ever have to go back here or think about it ever again. The Cave of the Gi is the worst part of Final Fantasy VII. I'm sorry. Once our buds are well rested and our car has been repaired, we can move on to a curiously unarsoned Nibelheim, the pristine nature of which shocks both Cloud and Tifa to their early polygonal cores. Pokers around are rewarded with confrontations with enigmatic hooded figures who mumble something about future story developments, and fun conversations with gaslighting villagers wearing "nothing bad's ever happened here" t-shirts. You know, I wish it was my job to pretend I'd lived somewhere my whole life in order to cover up shady government secrets. How'd the interview for that job go? Did these people apply for this job specifically, or were they CIA-esque agents assigned to this task? Do they rotate postings like real government agents do? What if they want to go on vacation? Do they have to keep the ruse going even then? What if they put in their 2 weeks notice? Are they just stuck with this job for the rest of their lives? What's the pay rate for villager impersonation gigs? Also, there's no children. If you dropped by a sleepy provincial town and trespassed into everyone's houses and saw no children, wouldn't you think that was a little weird? Wouldn't you be like,
Yeah, I was passing through Nibelheim the other day, and there were like 4 people living there, and all of them ain't got no children.
wouldn't that raise some suspicion? Speaking of, like, what would a prospective traveler be traveling through Nibelheim to get to? Like, does it get a lot of traffic? Does it have a thriving hikers tourist economy? Are people flocking from all over to have a go at fighting this giant bird on a bridge? Or marvel at this creepy zombie man down in the basement? I don't know, man. It just seems like it would be easier to just have the town burn down and claim it was wiped out by a completely unrelated forest fire or something. But I guess it ain't Shinra if it ain't going big. Speaking of Shinra, one can also poke around their records at Tifa's house and the mansion basement for hints towards future story developments. If you ask me, and if you've kept watching to this point in the video, then you sort of are asking me, these Easter eggs tip the story's writer's hands a bit too much, so it's a good thing they're so missable. Shout me out in the comments if you had no idea that these were here until just now. True to Final Fantasy VII's chill pacing, we can also just thunderbolts right out of town without investigating anything. But with both the gentle nudges of cloaked figures and the image of our memory of Cloud's relayed memories of those life-defining fantasy plot-inducing incidents 5 years ago, we burst forth into the Shinra mansion on pure instinct. Now it's full of irritating monsters. Locked behind a scavenger hunts puzzle and a slightly challenging boss fight lies our penultimate party member, Vincent. We find Vincent in a coffin mumbling esoterically about his occupation of a presumed Lovecraftian portal dimension nightmare in symbolic penance for a self-perceived sin. As men of such temperament are wont to do, Cloud and Vincent exchange backstories, and although he sported the sickest of early polygonal emo boy anime protagonist haircuts, this was sadly not enough to woo the woman of his affections, Lucrezia. Or is it Lucretia? Lucrezia was instead all about mad scientist man Hojo's mad scientistisms, which included both her and her unborn child's being subjects to classic mad scientist mad science experiments, which basically boiled down to, let's inject you with alien DNA and see what happens. In response to this, Vincent, possibly being afraid of being called an incel in his Twitter DMs, did nothing except get shot by Hojo at some point. Hojo, being the kind of mad scientist who considers it a sacrilege to let such a handsome clump of organic matter go to waste, experiments on Vincent and turns him into some kind of metahuman transformation monster who doesn't age. Vincent, true to the temperament espoused and symbolized by his haircut, blames himself and locks himself in a coffin for 30 years in order to atone for his sin of getting dumped and getting shot. I mean, I can't really say I blame him. Breakups are tough. If sleeping for 30 years was a viable recovery strategy, I bet we'd all take it. Anyway, our vampiric friend decides to join the Buddy-Brigade in exchange for the opportunity to murder revenge that mad scientist Hojo. Cloud, not bearing any particularly positive sentiment towards such a man, accepts these terms and conditions. Owing to his status as an optional character, Vincent has few, if any, relevance to any further story developments of Final Fantasy VII, and is therefore unlikely to be mentioned much outside of this section. Given that this right here is the goldenest of my golden opportunities to opine about Vincent, I shall seize it. I love Vincent. I love Vincent because of his enigmatic connections to the weirdly surreal, vaguely Lovecraftian figure of Jenova. I like that Jenova and her capabilities are shrouded in like this mystic mystery. I also like that the nuances of Vincent's nature and that of his relationship to his gothic beloved Lucrezia are left to interpretation. Sometimes less is more. For a contemporary example, my mind turns instantly to Boba Fett from Star Wars. Boba Fett from Star Wars rose to Dark House character belovedness because 1, he's got a cool outfit, 2, he's got a cool ship, 3, he's got a cool gun, and 4, he didn't talk much. Thus, the robustness of his aesthetics and the sparseness of his presence permitted the viewer to compose whatever backstory they wished for this enigmatic character. To like Boba Fett is to like the story one tells oneself in their head about Boba Fett. Conversely, Boba Fett's appeal drops significantly the more canon specifies aspects of his character, as these canon reveals will inevitably clash with the stories the audience has crafted inside their heads. What I'm saying is, Vincent should definitely not have had a spin-off game centered around him, any more than Boba Fett should have gotten a TV show centered around him. Sometimes side characters are more interesting as side characters instead of main characters. Vincent's appeal exists exclusively in the mystery which surrounds him. To elucidate that mystery beyond what is absolutely required by the plot ruins the character. In other words, there's a 99% chance that Vincent is going to be rendered lame. I'm talking Deep Soldier, Weiss, and the other guy lame in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. Sorry, Vincent. Better luck next remake. Further incursions into the basement reveal one of only 3 scenes containing Sephiroth in which he does not end the life of another creature. As with his hooded flunkies, Sephiroth cryptically foreshadows future plot developments before throwing a materia at us and flying away. You know, I bet Sephiroth wishes he'd unlocked the ability to fly much earlier. But anywho, once we've had enough of these hot Nibelheim plot developments, we cross Mount Nibel, where we get to fight a bird, a dragon, a spider bug crab thing, and we get to collect some delicious trinkets. Thus, with our terrestrian traversal itch scratched and our tantalizing trinkets acquired, we venture forth into Rocket Town. Look, man, it's Rocket Town! Rocket Town is a town that was built around a rocket. You can even look at that rocket with an old man whose sole activity in life is looking longingly at this very rocket. If you indulge him, you even get a neat sword. This is definitely what I would do if I was an old man living in Rocket Town. Further inquiries into the auspices of Rocket Town reveal its denizens as possessing an unnecessary amount of firearms, a bar as representing 33% of all in-town commerce, and one of the few instances of indoor plumbing in all of Final Fantasy VII. I am thus forced to conclude that Rocket Town is America. Further proof of Rocket Town being America is embodied by the 9th and final applicant to the Buddy-Brigade, Sid. Sid is a red-blooded, apple pie munchin', Coca-Cola guzzling, chain-smoking, tough-loving, foul-mouthed American man, as interpreted by a culture whose first impression of Americans were gruff military men showing up on their eastern horizon and demanding trade. Or, for a more contemporary example, as gruff, no-nonsense, chain-smoking, Coca-Cola guzzling American GIs in post-World War II occupied Japan. For further proof, look at Sid's nose. That's an anime white guy nose. And look at those profoundly horizontal eyes. Everybody else has got big, round Japanese people eyes, but Sid's got them horizontal anime white guy eyes. Further proof of Sid's Americanness lie in his embodiment of being a gruff, loud, opinionated, and fiercely independent personality, as any average American would come across to the demure, deferential, and collectivist Japanese culture. Sid would definitely cross the street regardless of whether or not the little person symbol appeared to grant him permission, cause there ain't no carts coming. That's American. Sid would definitely criticize a person attempting to make a hamburger incorrectly, cause it's possible to do that. Europeans do it all the time, and that's American. There is a 100% chance that Sid would use the phrase,
Ain't nothing.
in even a formal conversation. That's American. I mean, look, Sid even uses a Spanish word apropos of nothing, despite his cultural refusal to actually learn that language. This man is an American. One of the fantastic things about connecting with a piece of art is that while you grow and change, it stays the same. Thus, do works of art become litmus tests for yourself? I played Final Fantasy VII as a little tiny child, as a chubby teen, as a slob in his early 20s, and as a mostly functional adult in his late 20s. And during every outing into its fiction, I find new things to appreciate. For example, young adult me identified most predominantly with the main character man Cloud, and his young adult man problems, like building his whole personality around trying to get girls to like him, or having to put considerable effort into keeping gay icon Sephiroth from taking over his body. But now that I'm older than Cloud will ever be, I find myself connecting more to characters like Cid and Barret, with their adult man problems like, this evil corporation keeps wrecking all my stuff, and this evil corporation keeps getting in the way of my dreams. All this is to say that despite his comparatively little screen time, I like Cid a lot. In the same way that Aeris is the first half of the story's relatively relatable normal person, unburdened by the extreme drama which has systemically ruined all of the other people's lives, Cid is like the latter half's version of that character. Cid, more so than any other member of our Buddy-Brigade, has completed his internal personality project and does not need an entire supernatural therapy session to contend with his traumas. Thusly does Cid easily step into the role of functional adult and the party's team dad. For there must come a time in every young man's life where he must cultivate a Cid within to father the Cloud of his heart. What I'm saying is, Cid is the character that I have come to appreciate much later in life, and only after I've put more of the world into myself. Cid is more representative of my current personality. Over the past 15 years, I've evolved from Cloud into Cid, and I think that's interesting. And so, with Palmer booted, Cid recruited, and the tiny Bronco marooned, our party takes to the sea to prepare themselves for Season 2's weighty climax. But in true Final Fantasy VII fashion, we are, of course, not above a little side questing. So, should we venture westward into the island of Fantasy Japan, we will embark upon a wacky, lighthearted side adventure involving resident punk Yuffie stealing all of our materia and then disappearing into the sunset. Conventional wisdom holds that Yuffie was nearly cut from Final Fantasy VII, though was instead relegated to an optional character. The intricacy of her side quest is largely accredited to event planner Jun Akiyama, who designed most of her cutscenes due to his fondness for the character. The scenario in question involves us scrambling around Wutai searching for Yuffie, only to eventually team up with our rivals in the Sony Yakuza to save both Yuffie and Vampire Diaries from the ravenous clutches of Midgar hyena turned international sex predator Don Corneo. After fighting a big bird who decimates our HP with Arrow 3, despite Arrows 1 and 2 existing nowhere that I've ever seen, the dynamic duo of Reno and Rude just flat out kill Don Corneo. Okay, stop right now. Do not post a comment telling me that there's some spin-off book that reveals that, like, Don Corneo survived and became some kind of Joe Rogan podcaster, okay? Only the original Final Fantasy VII is canon, okay? It's the only work of fiction that I care about in the broader Final Fantasy VII extended universe. And yes, I am including Crisis Core in there. Look, it's got its moments, okay, but Crisis Core, it's not that great, okay? Genesis. And Genesis is going to show up in the remake trilogy, and it's going to be awful. But in any event, those games never existed, okay? This movie never existed. These books never existed. Don Corneo fell from a height sufficient enough to liquidize his organs upon impact with the cold, cruel rocks below, okay? He died like a dog, choking on his own blood. That's what happened, and that's exactly what this guy deserved, okay? Fascinatingly, though this side quest is dependent upon the recruitment of and anomaly about exploring the character of Yuffie Kisaragi, I find this particular sequence more endearing as a bonding exercise between the Buddy-Brigade and the Sony Yakuza. We earn Reno and Rude's villainous respect, cemented perfectly in a punctuated display of order delay. And in turn, we begin to sympathize with their evil for a paycheck nature. Evil for a paycheck is still evil, but it's a more redeemable evil. In fact, this bunning of begrudging buddom with these fashionable maniacs is even cemented in game mechanics, as if one completes this side quest, one can opt out of the final Sony Yakuza battle in Season 4. That's sweet. Though if you're like me, you still fight them anyway because you need to get your hands on some delicious prizes. Thanks for the rare items, losers. Sorry about no severance pay. In gratitude for rescuing her from the perverse clutches of this sick, disgusting, rotting corpse, now painting these cultural statues with his blood, Yuffie gives us our materia back and commits wholeheartedly to the quest in full. If we want, we can just end things here and leave Wutai. Or we can take Yuffie to a 5-story pagoda just to the left of the giant statues, which are currently having Don Corneo's slick viscera swept from their stone faces, and after fighting 4 bosses, we get to beat up Yuffie's dad. Beating up Yuffie's dad gives us a little cutscene, which elucidates Yuffie's frustration with the stubborn culture of her home, and how the stubbornness has laden them on hard times. Yuffie's dad, Godo, or as I called him when I was little, Godo, responds with surprising sentiment, and a line which has stuck with me for many years. Strength without determination means nothing, and determination without strength is equally useless. Here, hidden behind 2 layers of optional content, lies perhaps the most profoundly philosophical statement uttered by any character in Final Fantasy VII. Godo, though materially powerful, has had his spirit broken by recent events. Through what we can imagine to be his rippling muscles tucked beneath his robes lies a heart beset by despair. Though Godo knows he is fully capable of waging a second war with Shinra, he also knows himself enough to know that he lacks the heart strength to garner any other outcome than the woe that he has brought upon his community. He also suspects that his daughter Yuffie does possess the heart strength to make a heroic impact upon the world, though she lacks a certain meat strength. Thus, through the tried and tested means of transforming into a triple-faced murder monster and fighting one's offspring in a contest to the death, he imparts upon Yuffie the trials needed to steal both her heart and meat strength. And seeing as a major theme in Final Fantasy VII is the heroic confluence of heart and meat strength, insofar as we spend literally 70% of the plot cultivating the heart strength of each and every one of our buds in the Buddy-Brigade, this side context strikes me as some of the best side content in the world. Modern companies would make you pay $20 USD to experience something like this.
Once we're done roaming the world in our broken airplane, we can jump back into the plot by learning from some guy in a shack that big boy daddy man Disney World manager / jail warden Dio has in his possession the MacGuffin we need to crack open the Temple of the Ancients. Dio lets us have it if we humor him in tutorializing the fighting arena in the Gold Saucer. However, before we can rush off into the unknown, the plot keeps us here so that we can experience the first and last cutscene in which all 9 members of the Buddy-Brigade are present. Cloud gives us a recap of the plot, and then everybody goes to bed. However, Cloud, being the main character man, gets to go on a date with one of 4 candidates. Seeing as the Yuffie and Barret options are jokes, we'll stick with covering the Tifa and Aeris dates. Cloud, Aeris, and Tifa form a subtle love triangle that the love triangles of other stories can only dream of being. Maybe you're a Cloudsy person, or maybe you're a Clarith person, but so strong is the characterization and thematic writing of both that frankly, both dates feel canon. One of the benefits that video games give to themselves is that they can leave certain plot resolutions to the decision capacity of their players. Love triangles in other mediums must eventually be resolved one way or the other, and to the inevitable disappointment of one team or the other. Video games get to have both, and good video games make both choices feel like canon. I like the stammering awkwardness of the Tifa date, which showcases the profound failure of these 2 characters to emotionally communicate with one another. This reinforces the patchiness of their relationship that no amount of globe-trekking adventures can hope to ameliorate. Plus, it foreshadows a future failure in Cloud and Tifa's ability to communicate emotionally with one another that's gonna have apocalyptic ramifications later in the plot. It also adds to the tension, which will be cathartically released once Cloud and Tifa finally get around to actually telling each other how they feel. The failure of their Gold Saucer date is then rectified with the success of their pre-climax Highwind date. The Aeris date is also great, as it showcases to us the laudable completeness of her emotional honesty. Aeris tactfully expresses her emotional interest in Cloud in such a way that might actually take root within his diseased brain, and such motions to cementing the profound closeness of their budding relationship will, of course, turn to heart-wrenching tragedy upon Through the simple game mechanic of invisible number accumulation, the player can choose to write a delayed but ultimately satisfying love story between 2 estranged childhood friends, which eventually cathartically blossoms into a much-deserved romance after they both go through just so much. Their consistent inability to communicate with each other climaxing in a quiet moment where neither of them even have to say anything to say what they mean. Or, one can write an ultimately tragic love story where 2 lonely people, who have both lost everything, finally find each other, only to have the rug pulled out from under them once. And if you ask me, either story is a pretty great story. But getting back to things that will always happen in every playthrough of Final Fantasy VII, our cute date is cut short by Cait Sith's outing as a shameless Shinra Company double agent. He steals from us our necessary MacGuffin and delivers it to the cold clutches of the man, giving Shinra the leg up on our upcoming archaeological excursion. Our confrontation with Cait Sith is notably somber. He notes the futility of murdering him, as his presumably robotic form will simply be replaced. Noting the gaping wounds which he has just left in our hearts, Cait Sith attempts to smooth over the betrayal by expressing his admiration for us. Though none will ever sing us praises, we continue to fight for a better future. Being with us has given Cait Sith some turn-cloaking curiosity, but for now we must contend with being the second wave of spelunkers diving into the Temple of the Ancients. We reach the temple and witness the first of Eris's ethereal brain conversations with the mysterious free-floating collective consciousness which permeates this ancient place. Upon summiting its peak, we come across the Sony Yakuza boss man Tseng, critically injured. Having been out-daddied by Sephiroth and out-vampired by Vincent, Final Fantasy VII sees fit to raise the stakes by sacrificing Tseng upon the Lamb's altar. After giving us the necessary MacGuffin that a traitor delivered to him last night, Tseng stumbles over to the corner to quietly die, alone, unloved, and all but forgotten. Hope the paychecks were worth it, Tseng. And so, after leaving Tseng behind forever in the altar of our memory, we enter the ancient ziggurat and endure its many puzzles, interacting with its enigmatic inhabitants whenever presented the opportunity. A glimpse upon a mystic portal reveals to us the presence of Sephiroth, who has just recently punctuated a villainous motive monologue by slicing Tseng's flesh open irrevocably. Accumulating worry at the anathemic man's declared apotheotic pretensions, we plunge into the depths of the temple, to a room beset with murals. There, Sephiroth, in his full ghostly visage, tells us of his plan. He will wound the planet so severely as to necessitate a cleanse of life. And once all is returned to the life stream, he will centralize himself within the wound, drinking up all the collective knowledge of every life form from every aeon, and thus upon apexing in power will be indistinguishable from a god. That sounds like pretty bad news for the millions of eggs which will be needed to craft this particular omelet, and Eris, having fully tapped into her Cetra powers, elucidates the means in which the omelet will be created. The ultimate destructive magic, Meteor. Once Sephiroth gets his hands on the black materia, he can summon Meteor to smash against the planet, creating the wound necessary for his master plan. Cloud has an alarming little freakout, which indelibly links his brain mumbles to Sephiroth. Snapping the stoic man to his senses, our team struggles to think of a way to remove the black materia from the temple. For within its hallowed halls are a series of puzzles one must solve, which will then cause the temple to condense upon itself until it crystallizes into the black materia. However, these puzzles must be solved from within the temple itself. Any who dare will be crushed by the temple and will die. And when you die, you're dead forever. This proposes a substantial problem, as Sephiroth has many cloaked figures in his back pocket, and he would gladly sacrifice them for black materia retrieval. If only the Buddy-Brigade had a member that expendable. Fortunately, Cait Sith volunteers for such expendability, as with his probably being a robot, he can be easily replaced with a second Cait Sith. This also serves as his apology for narking on us. Perhaps we might even accept this apology one day. Anyway, he gets a cute, overdramatic goodbye sequence, and then transforms the temple into the black materia. Our heroes then go to retrieve the accursed artifact, only to be waylaid by Sephiroth. Sephiroth reaches a spectral hand into the Gyric folds of Cloud's brain and puppets him like a puppet. Puppet Cloud places the black materia perilously into the palm of Sephiroth's hand, putting the world in as much literal danger as the stability of his psyche is now in metaphysical danger. The puppet strings lurch once again, setting Cloud to attack his dear friend Eris. Our third party member, seeing that Cloud is using such things irresponsibly, relieves him of consciousness. In a dream, Eris appears to him. He apologizes profusely. She tells him not to worry about it. He tells her that he can't help but worry about it. So she tells him to worry about it with everything he's got. Profoundly extraordinary circumstances warrant Eris's departure onto elsewhere, and such is the nature of both her task and her acceptance of herself that she ventures off alone, fading into the horizon. Our attempts to accompany her denied. However, Sephiroth then appears and announces his plan to accompany Eris. A foreboding latches its icy fingers upon the puppet strings of our hearts. Eris is in big trouble. Will the Buddy-Brigade get to her in time? Will the impending apocalypse be prevented? Will Cloud be cured of his brain mumbles? Will Shinra be stopped? Will the planet be saved? Will Red 13 ever be relevant to the plot again? The answers to all of these questions are future impending. But for now, this is the end of Season 2.